Good afternoon and welcome to today's Ad Week webinar, where we will, of course, be looking at whether a CDP is your solution to the cookieless future. And really what we're going to have is a panel of three top experts talking about ways to really build a resilient first-party data, certainly something that's quite timely these days. And our webinar today is being sponsored by Acquia. I'm Stuart File, Vice President of Branded Content at Adweek, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping here, just to make sure that everyone in our audience knows what to expect from our presentation and is also familiar with the features of our webinar platform. Our presentation should go somewhere in the 35 to 40-minute range. Afterwards, we should have some time for audience Q&A. So I want to urge you, if you have a question for our speakers at any point during our presentation, just use the question tool that you should be seeing right now. It should be actually underneath the video window that I just made a little bit smaller there, but you should see it there. So just use that to submit your questions. We're going to get to as many as we can during audience Q&A time. It's not too late to invite your colleagues to come and join us today, and we'd love it if they would. We sent everyone a final reminder email for today's webinar about 15 minutes ago. In there, you're going to find a link to the registration page. So grab that link, send it off to your colleagues. They still have plenty of time to come on in and join us live. If they can't make it live, good news is today's webinar, as all Adweek webinars are, is going to be recorded, and it will be available on demand, and we're going to send you a link to that on-demand version later this afternoon. Check your email about 3:30 Eastern Time. You'll get that. If you're interested in getting a PDF of today's slides, we should have a full PDF of the slide deck available to everyone in the event resources area. So if you go on in there, you should be, again, go ahead on in. You will find a PDF of today's deck. Feel free to go on in there and download that at any point. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone to please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars with an S. We've got a full calendar coming up. We're doing 4 this week, so 3 more on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Every week we're doing 3-4 webinars. See what's coming up. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. Check out the full archive of on-demand webinars as well. That includes a number of them from our sponsors today at Acquia. So again, adweek.com/webinars. Let me just move forward and just very quickly introduce our speakers to you today. Again, as I mentioned, we've got a really great panel. First up, we're joined by Julian Archer, who's our guest speaker, VP Principal Analyst at Forrester, where he's been focused recently on helping clients adapt to the global move for increased personal privacy compliance. And he came to Forrester a couple of years ago with the 2019 acquisition of Sirius Decisions. From the agency side, we're very happy to be joined by Beth Adams, who's Managing Director for Marketing Technology over at VMLY&R, where she leads their MarTech practice, providing thought leadership for agency and consulting clients on how to buy, implement, and use the latest technology for data-driven brand experience and customer experience. And then from our sponsor, Acquia, we've got Kevin Cochrane, who's the SVP of Product Marketing with extensive experience in digital experience space and been a leader in the CMS industry pretty much since its inception, leading marketing teams at a wide range of other companies, Alfresco, Adobe, Bloomreach, and of course, most recently SAP before he came on and joined Acquia. So I want to welcome our speakers, and we're going to just get things kicked off right away here. Let me bring Julian Archer from Forrester up on screen to start our webinar. Welcome, Julian.
Thanks ever so much indeed, Stu. Much appreciated the introduction. Thank you to everybody listening. I'm going to be talking today about building your own data strategy. I'm going to focus on 3 key areas. First, I'm going to talk about the major elements one needs to address as an organization to ensure that their first-party data strategy is successful. I'm going to then talk about the nuts and bolts of how you build that first-party data strategy. And a lot of the talk recently is about the cookieless world or privacy, and it sounds as though someone's about to hit you with a stick. I want to give you a positive, business-oriented reason of why first-party data strategy is so important. So with that, let me move on to the first of three major elements. I think it's really important, if we talk about first-party data, to really understand what data we're talking about. What data do you need in your business to drive your business forward? What's the context of trying to collect this data, store this data, use this data? Just saying I want data isn't good enough. You need to think about breaking down data into performance data, that data which helps you drive the KPIs and measurement to know whether you're doing a good job or not. And of course, the operational data, understanding your contacts, your accounts, your account hierarchy, what telephone format should be in, understanding the overarching business requirements you need of the data you need to drive your business forward. Then, of course, there's the other element, the area of data management, which is all too much about governance, about unification, about quality, the routines, deduping, et cetera, all the lovely stuff you know already about data management. But understanding what data you need and understanding how you manage that data is nothing unless you understand and think about the teams who are using the data. Your data experts, your data enablers, the people who are helping you understand and bring the data requirements that your final portion, the data consumers, have. So what we're talking about here is, do they have the right competencies? Are you training them to the right level, the appropriate level? Is there a culture of being data-driven, of understanding how important a first-party data strategy is? And are you making the use of data, the fact of having the decisions made by using fact-based analysis, being assured that that data is available? Are they able and capable to use that data in the right place at the right time? That's fundamental to team enablement. So those three key areas are something that need to be addressed in order to actually even begin to have a first-party data strategy. Then you think to yourself, okay, how do I drive that first-party data strategy? Now, of course, if you're in marketing sales, you have to be aligned with your company data strategy. Of course you do. But what I'm going to show you now are the key steps you need to take to be able to drive and understand what that first-party data is and how to manage it. So you need to have governance. If you're a marketing and sales team, you need to make sure you have governance routines, governance councils, understand what is allowed and what is not allowed. Bring discipline, governance, rigor to making sure your data routines are going to work. As I said before in the previous slide, you need to understand what processes are trying to be driven by data, what data you need, at which element and timely point of that process you need. So what data element do you need at what step in the process? That requires that we actually have an inventory of data requirements, and we can certainly document that as we move forward. We need to make sure, if we're data stewards, that we're actually capturing the voice of our internal customers. Are we giving them the data they need to make the decisions they have to make? And is that data being delivered in the right format? And if so, what is critical to quality? What is important and what's not so important? These three steps really outline the importance of understanding and enabling each of us to really make sure we're capturing the data we need to drive the process we've understood, to make sure we're delivering the data elements our internal customers need. So that's making sure that all our efforts are worthwhile and we're not wasting our time on worrying about data that nobody cares about. The next portion is really important, is understanding how to manage that data. Now, are you the situation where data just appears and you don't know where it comes from? Sadly, I often see companies where that is the situation. You need to make sure that you understand what data you have, how complete, what quality that data is, and what sources of data you have. So you need to make sure you've got your arms wrapped around the data you currently have. So undertake a port of entry analysis. Make sure you know where that data is coming from, where it's arrived from. And make sure you do have a recognized way of determining what quality looks like. Then you need to make sure you're acquiring the data you need. There's no point in acquiring tons and tons and volumes of data if you don't need it to drive your business forward. Make sure you understand how much data you need. Make sure you actually are able to understand what data elements you need and where that data is currently stored, and therefore how to unify the data. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about that later on in the presentation, of course. But once you've got that data, you need to make sure you're curating it, making sure that you are retaining good data and deleting bad data. And throughout all of this, you need to be measuring results, making sure that you can tell the story of how your improved data quality, your improved data unification is driving the business forward. So these 7 steps are actually critical to making sure you do actually drive a first-party data strategy. These are really fundamental steps, because if you don't do all of these, I'm sadly to say, you won't be very successful. But there is another layer we have to think about. So we understand the elements of what data we need, the context, the management, and the people. We understand here the steps to driving a first-party data strategy. But there's something we haven't talked about, and that's actually data compliance. It really is vital to make sure the data you're using is compliant, not only in the US, but every jurisdiction in which you're operating. What is the lawful basis for processing the data that you have access to? If you're a data controller, you need to make sure that any personal data you have is compliant. And for that, we need to think beyond just this implementation process of a data strategy. We need to think about having a compliance approach, making sure that the data we're using is compliant. So at the top here, you're looking at something I'm calling the corporate data privacy compliance strategy. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that you need to, excuse me, for some reason the slide is being forwarded. I'm going to go back to my slide here. What I'm asking you to do is to think about making sure that the stakeholders, the executives, are actually outlining and detailing and distributing to yourselves their strategy. What is their risk profile? What are they prepared to invest in training? What are their policies? What is the legal counsel saying? As a marketing and salesperson, you must be driven by these key statements that the team are making. At the bottom, making sure your people are trained and the technology you're using is going to be valid to drive a better and more compliant use of the data you have. And finally, are you measuring compliance? But in the middle is really looking at the data lifecycle. Again, very similar to what we were talking about in that first-party data strategy. So again, are you making sure you're getting data into your organizations, but this time making sure it's compliant? How are you storing the data? Who's responsible for storing? Maybe many marketers and sales folks won't be that bothered about that because they're hoping the legal or the IT folks are worrying about that. But you still need to make sure you have access to that data and you know where it's stored. What is critical, however, is that you are ensuring that the data you are using as marketing and sales folks is compliant. Making sure that the data you're using, you should be using. Making sure that you're not using non-compliant data. And finally, the maintenance and the disposal. Because sometimes compliance goes away. Sometimes you no longer have that lawful basis for processing data. So you need to make sure that you are maintaining not only the data for quality purposes, but part of that quality is indeed the compliance that allows you to continue to use it. And if you should be deleting data, not only from why is this data still here? This person hasn't been with this company for 15 years, delete it. Make sure that you actually have good routines in place for deleting data as well. So far, I've spoken about 3 key areas of what data is required: the business context, the management of data, and the team enablement. I've talked about a strategy to drive a first-party data approach in terms of those 7 steps, the governance right the way through to measurement. And here is the compliance bit, making sure that your overarching data lifecycle management processes ensure your continued data compliance. So far, that's sort of the facts, the logistics, that you must do this. But I want to give you a reason why it's important to do it from a business perspective, to help you make sure you drive better business. And so let me move forward to an area that is really grabbing a lot of attention in the B2B space now, and that's blowing up leads. For too long, B2B have followed the B2C colleagues in saying, well, we're really interested in the individual, in the lead. We hope to track if they've downloaded a white paper or something. But I'm here to talk to you about how we need to blow up leads from a B2B perspective. Now, why do I say that? Why do I say that pretty provocative statement? A lot of our marketing programs are driven to try and drive an individual lead, an individual person. He's come to my website, she's downloaded the white paper, and we get all excited about that individual, and we try and qualify that person. Maybe we score how many times they've downloaded different white papers or engaged with us. We then pass that information through to teleservices or BDR reps, and they will then pass that through to sales. A very traditional lead-based, lead-centric process. Now, why is that important when it comes to data? Because actually, that's not how B2B decisions are made. We know B2B decisions, if we follow that process, are actually less than 1% successful. From somebody saying, hi, my name is Julian, all the way through to a closed won business. Because the reality is that when it comes to B2B space, we know that 80% of the buying decisions are made by buying groups, individuals who come together to make buying decisions. And for that, we need to capture first-party data about the roles, the buying roles, the job roles, the data they're using, the interaction, the relationship between these individuals with each other and the buying group components. So we need to have a method in storing data to make sure we are able to tell our sales colleagues all that insight that we've gained. And if we're simply passing across an email that someone else has given us, that's not enough sufficient insight and information. So we should be stopping tracking leads, and with our improved first-party data, we need to be starting tracking opportunities. We need to start an opportunity using the opportunity record far earlier in the process. So I'll be very, very quick. We need to make sure on the left-hand side that our opportunity is going through a waterfall, and we need to be very granular in understanding the types of opportunity that we are looking at. Is it a brand new acquisition opportunity, or is it retention, upsell, or cross-sell? All this information is really valid and vital for a business-to-business function to be successful. All is dependent upon that first-party data strategy. And so if I can leave you with one slide here, namely, if we don't have this, if we don't have a good first-party data strategy, yes, we're going to be problems with the compliance, with privacy, with cookies going away, but actually we're not going to have very, very successful business. So let me leave you with an understanding of, if we don't have good data, if we haven't got the first-party data, we're going to end up having a very, very poor effect on our waterfall figures here. So we're going to have poor data with which to do our good market sizing. We're going to be spending an awful lot of money on stupid, irrelevant marketing campaigns to the wrong people because we haven't got the data to inform us properly. As we move down the waterfall, we're going to start looking and tracking incorrect or false buying signals. As we go through further down the waterfall, if we haven't got that good data, we may be relying on expensive external data, which is probably not as accurate as your first-party data. We need to think about the ability to track and measure and identify the people who belong to these buying groups. If we can't do that, we're not able to pass this information to sales and start speaking the language of sales. So all through this, I've been talking about the importance of first-party data, importance to be able to have the processes in place to track it and understand the importance of governance and quality and maintenance and retention, and then giving you a real-life business scenario where now we're stopping tracking the leads in a B2B environment and we're tracking opportunities and capturing the importance of buying groups. So with that, I'd like to pass you on to Beth. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you, Julian. So hi, everybody. I am Beth Adams, and as Stuart said at the beginning, I am part of VMLY&R. If you're not familiar with VMLY&R, we are a global brand and customer experience agency, and we create connected brands. As we talk about the cookieless future and we think about how consumer expectations of brands are changing, the example of, you're now compared to your last best experience. I think the idea of a connected brand is only becoming increasingly important as we need to compete in new ways and meet new consumer expectations. So what I want to talk with you a little bit about today is how we think about the intersection between experience and data strategy, and how when it's done right, they can really create sustainable long-term value for both the business and the consumer. So let's dive in. Going forward, building first-party data, it really starts with a consumer being willing to provide you with their information, whether that's by allowing on-site tracking or putting their information into a form. Gaining that interest and trust from a consumer requires you as a brand to provide value. The consumer has to get something in return for sharing their information. So we look at like the most successful brands, they focus on creating an experience that solves for both the emotional and functional needs of a consumer across the entire journey. And they obviously do that in the context of what will be valuable to their business as well. While brand experience has, historically been the driver of emotional value and customer experience, the driver of functional value, again, those most successful brands don't look at those two as independent of one another, but really as interconnected and always in a loop. And if we go back to first-party data, I see first-party data as really a critical undercurrent of all this. Informing the value propositions, powering our experiences that deliver on those emotional and functional needs, and also then providing us the ability to continually optimize in many of the ways that Julian was just outlining. But, I think there probably would be general agreement on all of this and head nodding, but, seeing it is one thing and doing it is always another. So how do we design and deliver a connected experience? How do we break down those silos between brand experience and customer experience? How do we get first-party data flowing throughout and really deliver on those human needs of the consumer? So in having this conversation with many, many clients, we at VMLY&R developed this visual. We have a few different names for it, but it's really kind of a connected stack. And it looks at how experiences and platforms need to come together in order to create engagement and ultimately, your connected brand. When we look at this with most clients out of the gate, they kind of look at the bottom and they see platforms and data and they think, check. We've got plenty of both of those. No shortage of historical data. We have all of the technology. But then when we look at the top half, that's where, some, they might say, oh, we've done some journey mapping or we know what our differentiators are. But, have we really mapped it back to, what are the emotional and functional needs of the consumer and how are our experiences paying off on that? And so really where kind of the magic happens and where we end up with the connected brand is when we're able to look at both the experiences and the platforms and how they work together to bring to life that connectivity through all of our interactions. And so really allowing us to harness creativity, technology, and culture to connect with consumers in a more meaningful way. So how do you get there? How do you get to the point where you can bring together your platforms and your experiences and connect with your consumers? As with many things, the transformation is multidimensional. It's not something that technology alone can solve. We also need to look across our people, our process, and our organizational culture. And technology also needs to be looked at in new ways as well. To really power these new experiences, our platforms and data really need to be seamlessly connected with our content. Our people need to be cross-functional. We need multiple perspectives working together to solve problems. And we need processes and a culture that facilitate all of that. So if we go back to that stack visual and kind of drill in a little bit deeper, as we look at the experiences element and getting to the bottom of what is emotional and functional value to a consumer, we have a few different tools that we use in helping our clients explore this and figure out what are the right ways to connect. And so a lot of these are grounded in human-centered design methods, but are focusing on uncovering those human needs of our consumers. We pull back out and then now look down toward the platform section. again, we have a few different tools that are used to uncover and develop solutions that are more scalable, empowering experiences. I think journey-driven development is one of the particularly interesting techniques that we use to really focus our development efforts around solving the needs of the user. So getting out of, oftentimes, business-oriented language and framing even our development efforts around the needs of the consumer starts to, pull teams together in a different way and also create solutions in a very different way. And so, as I said, it's, as we come back out, it's really when we can start to bring together our platforms and experiences that the magic really happens. And we begin to, provide a new way of thinking and a new way of experiencing and interacting that's truly differentiating. So to kind of, pull back and try to simplify and give you some tactical next steps about thinking, how do we embark on this journey? How do we start to work in this way and think differently? I've kind of outlined a few potential next steps here that we'd recommend. So the first being, if you haven't done it already, do formal journey mapping. And journey mapping isn't necessarily just, sequential steps, because we all know buyers don't move in a linear path. So journey mapping here is really about, again, identifying what are the emotional and functional needs of a consumer. I think jobs theory has been a great tool for us in exploring that and understanding a consumer's jobs to be done. That it's been a great way to put us in touch with those emotional and functional needs. Second to that, though, we do also have to understand what's important to the business, what's important to the brand, and what success looks like financially. And so oftentimes this is something I find, is roughly in everybody's head, but isn't written down on paper. And so it can be really helpful to get very explicit and define, what are our objectives and our goals and what's our brand promise, and then mapping that back to then the consumer journey. So once we've completed those steps, we really have to, at that point, take a step back and look at the technology, people, process, and culture. As we know what we aspire to be and the experiences we aspire to deliver, do we have the capability of doing it today? Do we own the right technology? Is our technology connected to our data and our content in such a way that it can drive experiences? Do we have the right teams and the right ways of working in place? And is this an organizational imperative? Do we have support across the board to begin to work in this way? And so then finally, as we begin to look at these different pieces, we can start to develop an integrated roadmap. And I know the term quick wins can almost be cliche, but I think it's incredibly important to getting long-term success. As we develop an integrated roadmap, this isn't just a technology roadmap. Again, it looks at how we're going to evolve the way in which we ideate, that we design, that we develop. Are we going to have an implementation layer as well to bring in new technology or data sources? We need to look at this roadmap across a variety of different ways. And as we understand our aspiration, how can we also understand how we can incrementally work towards that and, achieve quick wins, but will ultimately, keep us on the path to that longer term goal. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kevin to talk a little bit more about how a CDP is also a leader in this whole process and connecting experiences and platforms.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. And thank you so much, Julian, as well. I'm Kevin Cochrane, Senior Vice President, Product Marketing here at Acquia. And I wanted to start first with a really practical, real-life example of how we can really think through a first-party data strategy and taking a different approach to understand our customers' emotional and functional needs by doing journey-driven marketing. Journey-driven marketing that leverages the power of a CDP to collect the right data at the right time and provision it to the right employee so that they can help deliver impact for the customer that delivers impact on our business. And there's no better place to start this story of journey-driven marketing than understand the journey we've all been on. Post-pandemic, prior to going into this new wave, many of us took the opportunity to get out of our homes and to go visit, family and other loved ones that we haven't seen in quite some time. And for many of us, it was a process of getting inspired to get excited about actually leaving the home and getting on a plane again, despite all the concerns about that. And we needed some inspiration to get to Wheels Up. So let's take an example of a fictitious customer that basically started out at home and started saying, where do I want to be now that I have the opportunity to travel? And let's look at this couple, the Morrises, Brian and Kevin. And they're really excited to go visit their family and friends. And they're very eager to start a new holiday. And much like Julian was saying in the B2B context, it's not just about a lead for an individual, because guess what? They're a couple. They make a decision by committee, the two of them, and they each have their own individual roles that they play. And unfortunately, without understanding the needs of this couple, bad data can lead to a bad experience that impacts not only their satisfaction, but ultimately can deliver poor business results. So let's take a start on their journey. So first and foremost, Brian starts doing some online research to look at available options. Doesn't actually book anything, but actually takes time to actually sign up for a loyalty program for the hotel that they want to stay at. Next up, actually, after speaking with Brian, Kevin decides to make the decision to actually book the flight and book the hotel. Kevin actually calls into the call center to book the hotel and make the reservation that Brian originally began before he abandoned his cart and signed up for the loyalty program instead. Now, unfortunately, this bit of data is totally unknown to the brand. The fact that something happened on the website that was actually connected to a later event that happened in the call center, all of those data elements are missing and not connected. Then later, of course, what happens is poor Brian starts getting spam email for completing his reservation, when actually his husband, Kevin, has already done that. So this is a bad experience and just shows that the brand doesn't really know who Brian and Kevin are and what they're looking to accomplish, certainly not meeting their emotional or functional needs. Then, of course, they actually go to the hotel. And because Kevin was the one that booked it in the call center, all of the loyalty information and preferences that Brian set up for is totally unknown to the concierge at all. So there's no personalization. There's no recognizing that they're a new loyalty member and this is their first visit to the hotel, and it could be very exciting to get them to come back again and again and again. Essentially, they're just an anonymous visitor and just gets a very basic check-in procedure. And then, of course, when they check in, poor Brian starts getting email messages from the loyalty program about discount offers for the hotel that they're actually staying in. There's actually no knowledge that he's already checked in with his husband, Kevin, and they're already on their holiday. And it's just interrupting the experience, knowing that the brand doesn't know who they are. And of course, when they're done with their experience, they travel home. And unfortunately, they get two pieces of direct mail because Kevin was the one that booked and checked in, and Brian's a member of the loyalty program. So they actually each get an independent direct mail. Clearly, they already spent time at the property. This brand does not know who they are as a couple, doesn't know anything that they did. And this is just a bad experience and a lot of wasted time and money. So at the end of the day, the challenge with this journey is not only not connected, but it's not meeting anyone's functional needs. And it's not meeting their functional needs because we're missing key bits of data across every step in the process. And we're unable to correlate that data into a higher level construct of a household. Who are these two individuals that collectively are making a decision? So much like in Julian's case, which he's talking about in the B2B scenario and understanding the buying committee as it relates to an account, that same thing is also true increasingly in a B2B world, in a B2C world, where actually it's not just an individual making an atomic decision, but there could be many members of a family or a team that are participating in this decision-making process. And of course, this experience is not only painful for the actual couple, the Morrises, but think about the employees as well. The employees want to live up to the brand promise. The employees want to be ambassadors. The employees also want to meet their goals. But at the end of the day, what they're seeing is because they don't have access to the right data, they don't have access to the right insights into who this customer is and what they're looking to accomplish, they're not able to do their job effectively. They're not able to be brand ambassadors. They're not able to meet their functional objectives either, which of course impacts their emotional connectedness to their job and to their brand. Everyone wants to do a good job and everyone wants to make customers happy. We just have to empower them to do that. So all of these breaks in data also results in really poor business results. As Julian highlighted, you could wind up spending a lot of dollars on a lot of third-party data that really doesn't have any meaningful impact in driving conversion. It's just wasteful spend. And that's because, again, all of the data that you do have is locked away in some data lake or some data warehouse, and it's not accessible or understandable or actionable really by anyone in the business. So what we believe here at Acquia is the solution to implementing a first-party data strategy is to let the data flow. Let the data flow into a customer data platform that can democratize access to data and insights to actually power every single stage of the journey and help you really understand who the Morrises are as a couple and what each of them is doing in terms of the buying decision to go on that vacation and how best to tailor the experience to each of them as individuals and as a couple in order for them to have a delightful first experience post-pandemic. And to do that, you of course need to unify the data in a common platform that can collect all of the functional data that you need and provide all of the governance and compliance so that you can not only deliver a great experience, but it can be safe and trusted. And of course, the whole goal of this is to make certain at the end of the day that with the first-party data strategy, by connecting to the emotional and functional needs of your customer, in turn, that will not only deliver impact on them in terms of their overall loyalty, but it will have outsized impact on revenue and operational efficiency for your brand. So the key goal here is with a customer data platform, for the very first time, you can deliver a true 360-degree view of your customer, the interaction in the loyalty system, on the website, in the call center, in the reservation system, in the hotel, and correlate all that information together and understand the consumer intent through machine learning and democratize access to these insights to each and every person that's attempting to drive the customer experience. The digital marketer, the call center agent, the reservation clerk in the hotel, each and every one of those employees, in order to be ambassadors, needs to have the key insights that are necessary to understand how to help the Morrises have that delightful holiday vacation. So let's drill down into what the impact of this is on real brands today. So number one is you need to have that unified view of a customer that's a trusted source of truth. As Julian highlighted, if you have bad data, you might as well not have data at all. First of all, understand your business requirements and understand the data that you need to drive those business requirements. And once you understand that, make sure your employees have access to that unified view. So getting that unified view of a customer is really all about identifying real people and the role that they play in a buying decision as an account or as a household or as any other group. So in this particular case, resolving Brian's identity, resolving Kevin's identity, understanding that they are the Morrises and that they are a couple that is looking to have that post-pandemic holiday, that is the key insights to understand them as actors in this overall journey. It's not just Brian, it's not just Kevin, they're a household, they're a couple. They're making a decision together. Your employees need to know that. Otherwise, the experience is broken. A good example of an Acquia customer who's done this with our CDP is Lululemon. And one of the things that Lululemon was able to accomplish was to eliminate all of the different siloed data stores across their online and offline locations. so that all of their stores, all of their digital channels have one resolved view of who that customer is, so that all communications, all experiences are tailored off of the unified view of all customer behavior, whether it happened in the store or whether that happened online. And the results of this are amazing because the reduction in all of the wasteful spend in various different campaigns, it suddenly goes away. And not surprisingly, it has outsized impact on the customer. So number one, massive increase in revenue, massive increase in website visits, and also greater engagement of the customer in terms of actually participating in their events. And I'll go a little bit more quickly, but of course, once you get that 360-degree view of the customer, just as Julian said, you need to empower your team with it so that they can make smarter decisions. Otherwise, it's just not useful to even collect the data at all. This means you need to democratize access. Everyone needs to be able to access a dashboard. Everyone needs to be able to discover insights in a very simple, easy way using machine learning. A customer that does this very, very well with Acquia CDP is PVH, where literally, as opposed to just having the group of data scientists that everyone had to turn to and make a ticket request to and wait weeks and weeks and weeks for an answer, instead, everyone was able to access customer insights across the business. Over 2,400% increase in people that were able to make smarter decisions by accessing that centralized view of a customer. Smarter employees make smarter decisions. Smarter decisions lead to smarter outcomes for your customer, and it makes everyone happy in the end. You also want to turbocharge your marketing with machine learning because, again, when you're providing insights to your digital marketers, help them really uncover new insights that in a very busy day, they might not have time to discover themselves. This is the power of machine learning to augment our own intelligence by giving us the opportunity to discover things that we might not otherwise be able to see with our own eyes because we simply didn't know to look or we simply didn't have the time. This is the benefit of machine learning for marketers. And we provide dozens of out-of-the-box models that make it easy as drag and drop for everyone to be able to understand how to best optimize content, best optimize engagement, best optimize next time to deliver the next personalized email. Good example of a customer that's doing this with Acquia CDP is Moose Jaw. And the benefit of just turning over greater intelligence and capabilities to empowered brand ambassadors is just astronomical. Over 30% increase in just profit margin, 125% increase in conversion rate, and overall cost of customer acquisition down by 10%. Again, smarter, more empowered people make smarter decisions. And that, again, has smart results on your business. And of course, as with everything, when you're looking to put in part a first-party data strategy, you need to make certain that you're doing it with confidence, with a trusted partner who understands data privacy, data protection, and your ability to scale to all of your global audiences. And of course, here at Acquia, we manage more than 8 billion profiles, one of the original CDPs in the marketplace, long-standing 15-year history of helping our customers with the first-party data strategy and delivering outsized business results. And lastly, of course, wonderful experience is all predicated on also being able to deliver wonderful, compelling, engaging content to help that online researcher really understand the brand promise and understand what opportunities you can afford them as they're looking to go their own journey. And having a CDP be the backbone to power your entire digital experience platform so that every piece of content, every interaction, be it in the call center, on the mobile app, in the kiosk, is 100% powered and tailored by data, is what we believe is critical here at Acquia. A good example, finally, of a customer doing end-to-end composable experiences, personalized experiences based on orchestrated journeys is our customer Lids. Fantastic example of someone just across the board delivering outsized business impact in terms of increasing revenue, increasing site traffic, and ultimately driving a happier and more loyal customer base. And of course, we'd love to share with you more examples of wonderful success stories that we can help you deliver with VMLY&R, leveraging the outstanding framework Julian provided from Forrester. And we would love to follow up with you and learn a little bit more about what opportunities you may see with really pursuing a unique strategy around first-party data. But with that, I'll turn it back over for our Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Well, Kevin, thank you. And Beth and Julian, thank you all as well. I've brought you all back up on screen here because we're going to move into audience Q&A in just a second. Let me take the slides down. There we go. Again, I just want to invite our audience. We're going to have about 10 minutes for audience questions. We do have a number of them queued up, but I do want to invite everyone, if you do have a question for our speakers about anything from your data strategy to your technology implementation to that great customer experience that Kevin was outlining. Simply just use the question tool that you should see on your screen to submit your questions. Again, we're going to get to as many as we can. If we don't have a chance to get to your question, I always do make sure they get forwarded over to our sponsors, in this case, Acquia. So there's the opportunity for an offline response. Two quick reminders, because we did get questions on this. Number one, a lot of information got shared in the slides. If you want to download a PDF of the deck just to have and review afterwards, you can do that. Grab it right now from the event resources area. You should see that tab on your screen right now. Also, today's webinar has been recorded. It will be available on demand. We're going to send a link over to that on-demand version to you about 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern time today. So feel free to share that with your colleagues if you think they're going to benefit from some of this information today. Let's get into some of these questions. And Julian, as you were talking, look, we know privacy issues, everything going on around that. As much as we talk about the cookieless future, I mean, this really began with GDPR and CCPA and all the regulatory environment that's going on. Again, we don't need to go historically, but let's talk a little bit about, again, what's on the horizon right now in terms of privacy that brands really need to be concerned with, beyond just, cookie deprecation or what's going on with Apple, so that they really need to, again, be in full compliance.
Okay, so I don't want to be the bringer of bad news here. I'm a privacy lover. I actually think it's really important because it makes us drive and do better business, makes us more data aware, makes us really focus on our first party data strategy. So that's why I talk so much about it. I think the reality is that we need to look at, from a B2B perspective, at some point in the near future, maybe a year, 2 years, e-privacy will come inside the European Union. E-privacy is an electronic communication law similar to CASL in Canada, for example. You may think GDPR is that, but GDPR is really about personal privacy and personal data. E-privacy is going to be the harmonization of all the laws within the European 27 countries, coming together to make sure that the things like electronic mail, email, telephones, etc., are harmonized. So under GDPR, folks generally sometimes use legitimate interest as a lawful basis of processing data. Under e-privacy, from everything we hear so far, that won't be valid anymore, and e-privacy will take precedent over GDPR. So at some point, e-privacy may come in, it's going to say, okay, we need you to have consent. So that's coming down the track. There may be implied consent. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I can't read the lawyer's minds, but e-privacy is coming down the track. But can I just say one thing? I think it's important to focus on the business benefit, on the fact that Kevin and I were speaking about the buying groups, about the importance of driving business and tracking data in a good way for you to understand your business. That's equally, if not more important than the privacy rules. Yeah.
And Beth, continuing on a number of questions here, all talking about privacy or privacy, depending on which continent you're from, as we go through here. But as we look at the restrictions on data usage, right? Obviously, the richer the data we have on individuals, the more custom one can offer a more customized experience. On the other hand, we also know that consumers are increasingly reticent on what they share. And that's what we saw with, iOS 14.5 and again, whatever those opt-in numbers are. So with increased restrictions, what does that ultimately mean to customer experience as you go through here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's why, when you look at your brand experience, oftentimes as the first point of interaction, looking at the emotional value that your brand experience creates with consumers is so important because it sets the tone for whether or not they will trust you or entrust you with their personal data. And so as we move through the brand experience into the customer experience, that's the point at which consumers need to see sufficient value for providing their information, unleashing their first party data and providing that consent. And so that's why, we focus so much on the experience part of it and creating, meaningful experiences that consumers want to interact with and realize the benefit of providing their personal data for. So I think, it's about creating and making sure the consumers understand that there's a value exchange. They are getting more value and also providing us with value as a business.
Got it. Kevin, go ahead. You point on that.
I think we just need to take an entirely fresh approach to this. And I really love the concept of the journey-driven experience design and development that Beth, you highlighted earlier. I mean, think about the example of the Morrises. Brian goes online and suddenly he gets cookied, and suddenly the brand is starting to track all the other websites he goes and views, and starts to understand that he's looking at different vacation options, different hotels, and what he's reading in the news, okay? And that brand's building up a perception of Brian, and Brian doesn't even know it. Does Brian want that brand to know that he's looking at alternative hotels? Yes or no? Does Brian want that brand to know what news sites he's viewing? Yes or no? Does the news site have any bearing on Brian's profile and what he's looking to accomplish in the vacation? Yes or no? The answer to all of that is just no. Brian's trying to have a conversation as a human being with a brand, and Brian wants to tell that brand certain things that he's looking to accomplish. Now, in the real world, if some other person starts listening to every other conversation Brian has, and starts following Brian around the neighborhood to see where he goes, we would consider that creepy and just wrong. We would call that stalking. You get a restraining order, right? But yet somehow we decided that that was permissible, and in fact, state of the art in the digital world, it makes no sense. So I actually see this as a great opportunity, which is how do we do something radically different and say, what are Brian and Kevin looking to accomplish? What's the opportunity for them that makes an opportunity for us? So sometimes I think we just need a fresh perspective, and that's why I'm heartened that we have people like Julian and Beth teaching us a different way to think about this cookieless world.
Mm-hmm. So the question, Kevin, and let's talk a little bit about this, because we talk a lot about customer journeys, and there were some questions coming in, obviously, all about understanding sort of orchestrated journeys for customers, understanding orchestrated journeys, within whatever segments you're doing, and how you build that out. But one of the questions came in was actually talking about sort of other consumer behaviors, right? One of the things we've seen over the past 18 months is everything that seemed to be predictable about consumer behavior became decidedly unpredictable. So as one builds out this strategy as you go forward, how do you begin to orchestrate a customer journey in an era when you turn around and that behavior has shifted dramatically in the blink of an eye?
Yeah, I'm also going to ask Beth to jump in here as well, but I think that this is exactly highlighting the reason why we need a fresh approach. It's because if you actually took time to know your customers and talk to your customers and ask them their preferences, they would tell you if there was a value exchange and you did something for them. So all these people that got lost in the pandemic were so dependent upon, cookie data, understanding everywhere in the world they were going on the web. And suddenly, all that predictive models changed. Well, maybe we just needed to ask the customer, what's changed in your world? How are you doing? How are you feeling? What do you need? How can we help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, if you look across those dimensions of technology, people, process, and culture, if you're doing those things really well, you should be able to adapt quickly. And if you're, embracing agile methodology, not only from the development standpoint, but from top to bottom in experience design, you should be able to adapt quickly. And, you should be listening continually to that voice of the customer. And I think a CDP also becomes a big part of that, is making sure you begin to, early on, understand when changes and preferences are changing. Detect that very quickly so that you can adapt.
And that's where, I guess, Kevin, the democratization that you were talking about, which is this idea of, again, using everyone who has some level of customer interaction to have access to some of that information, or again, to know what to ask along the way at different moments, even if they don't necessarily know the person, to know the answer or to know the question to get to the answer. That's what's ultimately important going forward.
That's right.
Good. Glad to be able to sum it up, because guess what? We are running out of time here, everyone. We are fast approaching the top of the hour. So again, from our sponsor, Acquia Kevin Cochrane, SVP of Product Marketing, Beth Adams from VMLY&R. Go ahead, say it 3 times fast. I dare you. But Beth, again, in charge of MarTech, that area, thank you so much. And again, our guest speaker, Julian Archer from Forrester, analyst in that area, talking about privacy. Appreciate, again, all your insights and your time to answer some of these questions. Again, final reminders to our audience: if you want the slides, event resources, grab them there. Check your email, 3:30 today, link to the on-demand version. Share away, or better yet, have your colleagues register. We're going to send them a link directly. adweek.com/webinars, our webinar calendar. If this is a topic of, obviously something we cover frequently on our webinars, see what's coming up, sign up for an upcoming webinar, check out the full online archive as well. So again, thanks to our speakers and our sponsors from Acquia. Thank you to our audience for taking time out of your busy day. And we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Ad Week webinar. Thank you all.